like that all the time. Here's an example. A person walks into a store and buys an item. The owner of the store knows that he can shortchange the customer and get away with it. The question is not if he should do it, but why should he not do it? Now, a utilitarian might say that the person may realize that he was shortchanged, or it might get out that the owner of the store was dishonest and nobody would shop there. But let's change it for a second to annul that. Let's say that the customer was still stupid, but he didn't speak English. The utilitarian still might say that he may need all the money that he can get. He may be very poor, but let's make it a very wealthy non-English speaker. Therefore, you can shortchange that, or the owner can shortchange that customer, and it would be only beneficial to him and not be detrimental to anybody else. But Kant says that you still should not shortchange the customer, because it is the customer's right to have their dignity respected, and that it is an inviolable right that they should not be shortchanged.
So let's take, hi Mr. Kelly, how are you?
Sorry, Lane.
Let's take that equal pay for equal work, Michael. Walk me through this based on what you just told us about utilitarianism and Kant. Let's take equal pay for equal work. How does it play out right there?
Well, with equal pay, it would be considered morally wrong in either moral system, because in utilitarianism, the women are not being paid equally, and that creates, although it may create pleasure within the businessman, the workers rather, they need it more than the businessman. And with Kant's categorical imperative, every female worker has a right not to be shortchanged for their work. They have the right to have their rights respected.
So Kant would say to us, let's say the law doesn't exist. Charlie Baker didn't sign it until on Monday. If he was sitting in this room and I said, look, I'm a business person. I can do anything I want when it comes to paying my people because they're the ones that take what I offer them, what would Kant say to me, Michael?
He would say that it would still be immoral, regardless of whatever law was in place. The law in terms of legislation is only an interpretation of morality made by a government, while what's moral or immoral is always moral or immoral regardless of any circumstances put in place.
So you see that whole difference? Nice point, nice follow-up. I've been trying to confuse Michael by butting in, but you know he's holding his plan.
All right, objections to Kant's moral theory. Utilitarianism. Now, John Stuart Mill retorted by saying that the respect for human rights would create a prosperous society, which would create a greater pleasure for everybody. So Kant's moral system is really still just a desire for pleasure, because that respect for human rights is something which we all desire, and thus it annuls all of Kant's writings, saying that it's all just one utilitarian end. Impracticality. Arthur Schopenhauer disagreed with Immanuel Kant on the grounds that his system was simply impractical. It was impossible to practice, especially in a sensible way, because the system itself is full of contradictions, especially when it enters the real world. One common example, though not one of Schopenhauer's, is, let's say you're hiding Jews in your attic in Nazi Berlin, and two Nazi officers come to your door and ask if you're hiding any Jews. Any sane person would say, no, I'm not hiding anybody. But Kant reasons that you still cannot violate the dignity of those two Nazi officers, regardless of what they've done, regardless of what they will do, because it is their right to receive the honest truth.
Michael, hold on, I just got a big oh no from Jennifer in front of me. My desk shook because she shook her head. So what happened there, Jennifer? You went, oh no, what happened?
No, Kant is, I mean,
It's okay, tell us.
you know, the Nazis are violating rights, on their own, so it should be.
But is it possible to violate so many other people's rights to the point where they are not even human anymore? The simple fact of the matter is that they are human, which is something that's very difficult to admit. But so long as they are human, they do have that human dignity in Kant's moral system to receive all the rights that his moral system demands of people. And it is a very difficult moral system because of those practical implications.
He's not defending Kant, he's just telling,
Oh,
that's not how Michael feels. No, he's just laying it on.
You're unbiased.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's unbiased. This guy Kant, we wouldn't want him in class every night, but no, he's just bringing us this guy. Oh, this one here too. So thank you, Michael.
All right, the unreliable mind. Now, Sigmund Freud, the founder of the psychoanalytic theory, said that every human being has a different capacity for reason. And if every person has a different capacity for reason, how can we all arrive at the same universal laws? And if we cannot arrive at those same universal laws, then there can't be any universal law whatsoever, because it is all subjective. So just as pain and pleasure are subjective in the utilitarian system, all the ideas of reason and the ideas of right and wrong are still subjective within Kant's moral system. Now, Kant's moral theory is the most difficult, possibly, of all philosophy, not because of exactly what it asks us to do, but because of what it asks us to become. Kant wants us to become moral people, and when we become moral people, only that will lead to virtuous actions. But this can be incredibly difficult, because we have to set aside any emotion we have towards anybody who may be around us, any sentiment that we have in our souls, abandon all of that for pure reason. But the one saving grace of Kant's moral theory is that it's only through that endless pursuit of reason, that endless pursuit of morality and the universal law, that we can free ourselves of our natural bonds and become absolutely free individuals. That's it.
Nice job. Nice job. Okay, Michael, I really appreciate it. This is well done. I love your PowerPoint slides. I love the fact that you took the time to find photos, and by the way, your real-world examples were fascinating. Just to follow up on Michael's point about Nazis and hiding Jews in attics, the woman who protected Anne Frank and her family, her first name was Meek. I don't know her last name. She lived to be 100 years old, and she just passed away about a week ago, I believe. And when she was asked probably 3 months ago, Jennifer, as a follow-up, why did you do it? You could have been killed, could have been thrown in a concentration camp. She said, what else would another human being do for another human being, right? Because that's why you got so upset. Well, by the way, Michael was just presenting Kant. He wasn't telling us he truly believed in him, and I saw the pain. But can you imagine, me and her friends who protected Anne Frank and her family faced every day death in a Nazi concentration camp, but did it because it was the right thing, because what else would another human being do for another human being? So Michael, I have one for you because we've been struggling with economics and capitalism and all that. I'd like to believe that reasonable men and women, when left up to their own devices, will do the right thing. So am I don't know, a guy who believes in fairy tales and the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus when I say that reasonable men and women, when left up to their own devices, will do the right thing?
I think you might be.
You think I might believe in Santa Claus?
Well, if you look at individual people on their own account, let's discard of any customs, traditions, or laws.
Right.
The state of nature is undoubtedly chaotic. This goes back to Thomas Hobbes, who said that people must pledge themselves to an all-powerful ruler in order to rid themselves of the state of nature. But in today's climate, there's a fascinating philosopher named Michel Foucault who said that any moral system is completely fraudulent, and that it's only a way of accruing power of one group over another, moral relativism. And in the case of business, in the cases of, say, equal pay for equal work, when the employers don't want the employees to discuss their wages, it's not for some moral reason. It's just to reinforce their power over the employees so that they can protect their own interest. And Michel Foucault states that this goes back through all of history. In any moral system that has ever been developed, it has only been done in order to maintain power over other groups. An example of this is with colonialism. All the European powers thought that they were bringing civilization to Africa, when indeed all they wanted was whatever resources they could find.
Okay. Any questions or comments for this fine gentleman? Questions or comments? Oh, Gita, you always have something to offer. What do you think?
That's good.
Huh?
That's good.
What is your major going to be in college?
Well, I want to be a writer, so probably creative writing.
What else? Anyone else? Oh, Gita, you're laying low in this? You don't have any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm learning a little low on this.
Okay. Lee, how about you? Give us the 17-year-old perspective. Lee, give me a 17-year-old perspective.
Very interesting.
So Lee, here we go. And during the Vietnam War, I want to give you this quote, because this is how crazy things got. In the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese would take control of the village. And then we go in and drive them out, we take control of the village. And when we left, they'd come back, and so we were going after this village for about a year, just over and over again. People getting killed to make sure nobody controlled this village. So one day they flew B-52 bombers over the village and blew it off the face of the map. Gone. Everybody in it, every hut, gone. And when someone asked the general, watch this, why did you destroy the village and kill everybody in it? In order to save it, we had to destroy it. See the craziness of that? In order to save it, in our mind, save it from whatever we thought it needed to be saved, if we couldn't do it one way, we were going to do it another. So we bombed it, killed everybody, wiped it off the face of the earth. It's not there anymore. Nobody's going to rebuild there. Guess what? We're not going to be fighting over this village. You see how crazy things got? So Michael gives us this little walkthrough. But Michael, I got to challenge you here with a couple of things. Up until the 1860s, and by the way, 1865 was when it was passed, freeing Afro-Americans, banning slavery. From 1865 right up until 1963, we actually had two Americas. You in the industrial Northeast and Midwest and some parts in the West, everybody was pretty much treated the same, but you could go down to Deep South, and oh, whew, what a world that was. I took a trip in 1963 down south. I was only 10 years old. My brother and I are in Virginia. We see all these crazy people standing in line for a bubble of water across. So I see this bubbler. I don't read any sign. I just say, what's wrong with these idiots? Let's go get that water. We go over and start drinking water out of this bubble, and a guy comes up, a big redneck, grabs you by the neck, back of the neck, and says, hey, Sonny, what the hell are you doing here? You get over with your kind. Don't be drinking water out of that bubbler. That's for so-and-so. And I learned that. Now, Michael, I say that Afro-Americans were treated rather shabbily up until 1964. We had the Civil Rights Act. Women couldn't vote forever until, I forget the date, but 1920.
Foreigners could vote before us.
Oh, I'm sorry, foreigners could vote. Boy, Jennifer, you're on top of the game tonight. You might have showed up late before you were in there now. We got a subject Jennifer likes. Was society right not to give women the right to vote and to keep Afro-Americans? And I'm just curious, because...
England was the first.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Denying anybody the right to vote it's just flatly undemocratic. And within the utilitarian system, let's say, Bentham and Mill stressed that it's not the will, it's not the greatest good for the dominant class. It's the greatest good for everybody. And when you look at the suffering that the women and African Americans had to go through until they were granted the right to vote, the pleasure they would gain from having the right to vote far outweighs whatever societal dismay that may cause. And with Kant's moral theory, it's just simply immoral to deny anybody participation in any government whatsoever.
Okay. So we're going once or twice. Anybody else with a final comment or question?
England used to have the first for women to allow the women to vote, but was with some limit. So you have to be married, you have to be this age, or something like that. And after that, when they vote, was only one lady that was with all this parameter, with all this. You have to be from his family. There
Right.
was the caste and everything.
Sure.
So let's say that.
So when I mentioned, the bubblers down south, a bubblers for whites and a water fountain for Afro-Americans, I went to a little restaurant, a little diner. We walked in the front door, and I saw a sign over here, blacks over here, you eat here. The Supreme Court of the United States, in a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, had said it was okay to have separate but equal facilities in this country. So Michael's done a pretty good job for laying out for us philosophy, values, ethics compared to the law, and how sometimes it takes us a long time to get to it. So let's take Dr. Martin Luther King. He crosses a bridge in Alabama, and they beat everybody up. But nobody cares, because when they crossed that bridge that day, the only people crossing that bridge the first time were Afro-Americans. They got beat up, rained on with fire hoses, dogs attacked them, tear gas, but somebody filmed it. and put it all over the news. And now when Mr. and Mrs. America saw the